part of another significant USO event aboard the ship that has remained secret until now.
And the Roosevelt definitely attracted UFOs because of all of the technical equipment and all of the armaments that she had, and also nuclear weapons.
Jordan agreed to tell his mysterious and alarming story of possible USO contact for the first time.
I do remember the incident and the details of it because it just stays with you when you've gone through this.
October 2nd, 1963, off the coast of Sardinia, approximately 2 a.m. Jordan stands watch over his radar monitor. All is normal on this unusually warm fall night. Suddenly and without warning, he says, a contact abruptly appears on his screen, an object 600 miles downrange at an altitude almost impossible for conventional aircraft to reach at the time, 80,000 feet.
First blip came on at the beginning of about 2.5 hours into the watch. It was 600 miles from the ship at 80,000 feet. Then it came into 300 miles at about 35,000 feet, and then it came into about 10 miles at 10 to 15,000 feet from the ship off our port side. I reported it to the watch commander at the time, and he came over, went through the same process and confirmed it, and reported it to the officer of the deck on the bridge. Then the officer of the deck on the bridge woke up the captain after this contact started to move.
An object on Jordan's screen begins moving at a speed and on a course that, he believes, would have crushed any man-made aircraft.
This thing was covering 10 miles in just a few seconds, and it was traveling about 4,000 miles an hour. It was making right-angled turns, and it was almost like a Z pattern if you took about 4 Z's and lined it across your scope. So I could tell that she was going pretty fast, and then so when she stops, they didn't have any heat signature. Okay? This was highly unusual.
After Jordan makes his report, he says the FDR's captain orders the launch of a pair of Phantom II jets to analyze the situation.
They went to afterburners and then launched one right after the other. They left the Rosie and headed up on a course of about 012. So then I thought immediately that there might be something new going on here, because that wasn't following protocol as far as normal ship operations that I was used to.
The Phantom jets, now about 20 miles downrange, still see contact with the object. Jordan reports that the blip on his radar screen continues to dive close to the USS FDR before it disappears in a literal flash.
It's being recorded on the view board up on the right-hand side in CIC, and then the contact winked out about 20, 30 seconds after and I could hear one of the pilots say, "What the?" That's all I heard.
Moments later, he says, as quickly as it disappeared, the target returns, but now it's bigger and closer.
The Phantom II's landed, and then it winked back on again off the port side of the ship, and someone yelled out in CIC, you know, "What the hell is that?" And I bet you had 15 people out there with binoculars looking.
2:32 a.m. In full view of the FDR's crew, the USO reportedly hovers for a moment, several hundred feet from the ship, before disappearing.
I saw the Z pattern, and it stopped. It winked out, and then it was gone. I know what the fingerprints are of the electronics on Soviet aircraft, Korean aircraft, Chinese, MiGs, you name it. If it had been a meteor, it would have burned up in the atmosphere, and I have seen meteors streak across the scope, but it only happens in about 2 or 3 seconds. I mean, it's gone.
2:36 a.m. Jordan records the event in his logbook as a UFO incident. Seconds later, he says his commanding officer bursts in.
"Jordan, what did you put in your log?" And I had UFO in there, and I had the contact number at the time. I held it up in front of the commander, and he says, "You can take that out." My commander acknowledged to me in not so many terms that, "Yeah, Jordan, that's what it was, but no, Jordan, nobody else is to know." Period. I had too much respect for him in the Navy to say anything about it for over 20 years. This was an historical moment for the United States Navy, and it was left out of the logs.
As astonishing as these mysterious first-hand encounters aboard the FDR might be, they are far from the only ones. During her unusually brief 32-year commission, the FDR will host at least a half dozen similar events.
The FDR seemed to have been attractive to USOs. She certainly saw a lot of them.
Coming up, the 1952 NATO mission Operation Mainbrace is rocked by continuous UFO and USO reports. The lead ship, the USS FDR.
Wallace Litwin took photos of the flying disc going over the USS FDR in Operation Mainbrace.
And I've interviewed 3 people separately who have been on the FDR where large UFOs have been seen over the ship, observing it, making its presence known, and at times interfering with what appears to be some of the electronics on the ship.
The Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the first aircraft carrier to carry nuclear weapons, and UFOs seem to be drawn to anything that's nuclear related. The first instance of this occurring was in the North Sea off England on NATO operations.
September 1952. NATO initiates Operation Mainbrace, the first cooperative multilateral maneuvers since the war.
The FDR was part of a NATO fleet exercise off Denmark called Operation Mainbrace. The FDR and the RAF and British aircraft carriers were witnesses to one of the most incredible multiple USO sightings in history. The Ministry of Defense in the UK actually wrote it up as a USO sighting.
The exercise involves 200 ships, 1,000 planes, and over 80,000 men from its member nations in the waters near Denmark. As one of the largest and most advanced ships of the time, the USS FDR leads the way.
She was part of a task force that was sealing off the Russian submarine access through the North Sea into the Atlantic. Extremely important because what if there had been a USO base underneath the North Sea in that area north of Europe? We were surveilling them, they were surveilling us.
September 13th, 1952. The Danish destroyer Willemoes is in the Baltic Sea north of Bornholm Island. Lieutenant Commander Schmidt-Jensen and several crew members reportedly see a luminous triangular-shaped object moving at high speeds above the water, in close proximity to the main fleet. The bluish object travels westward, then suddenly turns southeast, directly toward the FDR. Over the next week, there are several more sightings, stretching from Denmark back to the Air Operations Command bases in Scotland. September 20th, 1952, 7:30 p.m. 3 Danish officers reportedly observe a shiny disc-shaped object rise from the water and pass over them, again headed toward the NATO fleet and the FDR. The fast-moving metallic UFO heads east and disappears into the cloud layer. September 21st, 1952, less than 24 hours later, 6 British pilots above the North Sea spot a shiny spherical object rising from the water and stealthily approach the fleet's location. They reportedly give chase, but the swift-moving object evades their pursuit. FDR veteran Jordan says that he spoke to a witness over 40 years ago.
They had a sonar contact from 3 or 4 destroyers, and they couldn't figure out what the hell it was because it was moving with them, and the damn thing was like a quarter mile wide, and it came up out of the water, and when it did